Captain Picard is delivering this year's commencement address to Starfleet Academy. Wesley Crusher is allergic to Metorapan treatments, and weeds keep popping up in the Pittosporum. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 19, The First Duty, written by Ronald D. Moore and Naren Shanker, directed by Paul Lynch. This was March 28th, 1992. We have a very special guest today. We are so fortunate and excited to bring to you Wil Wheaton. How you doing, Will?
Hello. I'm great. How are you?
Awesome. Before we get started, though, we want to give a very special thanks to Ryan Galloway out in Canada, our favorite Canadian, Ryan Galloway, for sponsoring this episode. Ryan, you picked an awesome one. Thanks very much. All right. Cirroc, this was your first
Ryan.
time, right?
Yeah. This was my first time watching this episode, Will. I thought you were amazing in it.
Really?
I mean,
thank you.
Yeah. I was happy to see you. I love seeing your storyline. But also just getting into Starfleet Academy. This is like a real peek into Starfleet Academy. This is a peek into your character being a little bit fallible, and
a lot fallible.
And I thought that the way you portrayed it really embodied the kind of peer pressures that young people feel in certain situations, whether that's like not to tell something or to withhold information or to cover for a friend, and the dilemma
that moment where you feel caught in between doing the right thing and not letting someone down. And it's awful when those two things are in conflict. I think that is a very relatable experience for people in their 20s, which I was when we did this.
Mm-hmm.
Cirroc, it's so interesting to me to hear you say that, and thank you very much. And I appreciate your perspective. I'm really grateful that you could see all of that. I watched it this morning before we got ready to do this, and I actually don't like my performance at all.
Really?
I feel like I am wearing my performance like it's someone else's suit. I see I catch myself acting all over the place in this episode, and I see myself playing like the same chord the entire time. And I couldn't really understand why that was until you said, Ryan, that this was directed by Paul Lynch.
Oh, tell us.
So I don't dislike Paul Lynch at all. He is the director who Brent Spiner famously tells this story about. We had a director who, before every take, whether it called for a lot of energy or not, would go, energy, 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 and action. Every single take. Did he ever direct you guys, Cirroc?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Do you remember that from him?
When you're saying this story, it's starting to recall different memories. Yes.
I don't think this came from a place that was not filled with love for the craft, love for making television, love for communicating and inspiring actors. It just did not work for me. It was very distracting to me. I've realized that I always needed a director to just clearly communicate to me, this is what I want out of this scene. If I don't happen to get there in rehearsal or on one of the takes, I kind of expect a director to just nudge a little bit and keep me going. That's the way I work as an actor. There are actors who don't need that. They can do it all on their own. And I've just had to accept that I'm just not one of those actors. And he wasn't helpful to me as an actor. And when you said it was done in 1992, I was either 20 or 21 years old, depending on what time of year it was. And I was in a real bad place in my life then. It was real, real hard. I was kind of in a place similar to where Wesley was. We have this episode coming up where Wesley's like, dude, Starfleet Academy is extremely not for me. being in Starfleet is all kinds of not what I want to do. I thought it was, but it's not. And I was in that place as an actor. I was really, really feeling like I don't know that this is what I want to do. And when I was there on the set in 1992, oh, the incredible amount of sadness and deep, deep, deep regret I was experiencing that I wasn't there every day and it wasn't my regular job. To me, going back there felt almost like an admission of failure, that like the career I had hoped to have when I stopped being a regular just hadn't worked. And at the same time, I was just so grateful to be in so many scenes with Patrick. Oh my God, that was great. And I clearly remember how fun it was to work with actors my own age for the first and last time on Next Generation. That
Ever.
was incredible. Ever.
Yeah.
Robbie McNeil was then and still is one of my absolute favorite colleagues I've ever worked with in the Star Trek universe. You know, I'm one of those people who very firmly believe that Nick Locarno just changed his name and became Tom Paris.
And you
because I think it's the same.
Yeah.
I think it's the same character that just didn't want to pay a licensing fee to Ron Moore, which is kind of fucked up. But it gave us that great moment in Lower Decks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So anyways, just as I was watching this, what I wrote down, I was like, I'm going to keep some notes here and just see what it is. And all I have is Wesley is sad. Wesley is sad. Wesley is sad. Wesley doesn't like this. Wesley is sad. And I'm just like, dude, act better. There's so much in this script that I just missed. What I am hearing from you this morning is, hey, Will, you're literally the only person in the world who sees it that way.
Yeah.
Everybody else sees this other thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's just...
That's why what you're saying is like so much news to me, because, you know, my pushback on what your experience of watching it is
yeah,
I felt as somebody who signed up for a small lie, right? It's like your buddy calls you and says, hey, if my girl asked, I was at your house.
I was at your house all night. Okay,
right?
cool.
Yeah,
easy.
Yeah.
Done.
And that's like, okay, that's the small lie you signed up for. And then
we find out he was stealing 11 cars.
The police are at your house.
The police are knocking at your door. Your wife is asking you about something, and now you have to it's like it's too much. It's gotten too big, and so it's like I felt that. I felt like, here's Wesley. He signed up his buddies to asking him to cover for him. The only person who's really going to get thrown under the bus is somebody who's not alive anymore. So it's not like he's going to be, you know, that damaged by this small little lie that we're going to tell. And then the lie goes to his dad. And then it goes to your mom. And then it goes to Captain Picard. And now it's like, and then the Academy judges don't believe. And it's like, it's spiraling into...
You're watching it fall apart in real time. You're just like trying to keep all that wet sand in your hands and keep it shaped in a ball. And it's not happening, man. That scene where Dr. Crusher and Wesley are talking.
I love that scene.
I love that scene too. Gates and I loved playing that scene because I've told you this, I am so envious of the scenes you got with Avery because I just didn't get those scenes with Gates as much as I wanted to, as much as either of us wanted to.
Yeah.
I know I love and trust and believe my children. I love and trust and know the men I raised. I know that one of the foundational pillars of their existence is you always tell the truth. You always tell the truth no matter what. And that doesn't mean just to other people. You tell the truth to yourself and you listen. And if I were Dr. Crusher in that situation talking to one of my kids, I would have the exact same thing. This completely objective, neutral censor data from something that was not meant to be watching you clearly made a mistake. It's not that you're lying. It has to be that all of these things that never fail, that are made by the Never Fail company, failed.
Right.
And it's a moment that I feel I as an actor missed. I would have loved to have seen and felt more how insanely guilty that makes Wesley feel. I wish that I had just given myself more layers. It is a thing that I really, really see in this a lot. I just see these moments where, like, damn, you missed it. Like, good enough, but I can see, and listen, I have the benefit of now being 31 years older than I was when we did that. And,
Yeah,
like,
but
raising kids and all of that stuff.
I got to push back. You mentioned my scenes with Avery. A lot of my scenes, I'd have to convey whatever message it was in a one word line, which would be dad.
Right.
And it would be how you say dad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would mean everything. It would be like, dad, you're pushing too much. You're pushing up on me too far. Or dad, you're crossing the line here. Or dad, I need your help. And it could be multiple tones of that dad. And I thought you nailed it with the mom in this one, because you did say to her in that scene, yeah, she was like, oh my God, no, I'm going to call the academy. This is ridiculous. And you looked at her like, Mom. And it was like, you got back up, Mom. Like, you don't know everything. Right.
Yeah.
And I felt that. I felt that in that. I mean, that's the moment where the kid has to, kind of put the fire extinguisher on their parent that's about to go balls to the wall and say, no, this is my kid and there's no way. And you're like, Mom, like, don't try to defend me, I think, or you say, don't try to protect me.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a realization in her moment, like, oh, I'm going too far because there's something he's not telling me. It was a great parent-child moment there.
Yeah,
and so,
it was. Yeah. I thought it was one of the best written that Gates and I got to have, for sure. There's a similar, very brief moment in the scene with Picard in his ready room, where I love the choices Patrick made in this scene, where he is, he's just giving Wesley a really basic lesson, right? He's being his dad, right? And talking to him like that. And he's like, I can see that as a parent. He's like, I'm going to talk to my kid and get my kid to, hey, fan people, I'm not saying Picard is Wesley's father. Okay, let's be very clear about that.
No, but definitely a father
but
figure.
You're like, yeah, of course. And you're like talking to your kid. And the first place you're going to go is, I love you, buddy. And everybody fucks up and it's okay. We're going to get through this, but you got to do the right thing. And Wesley just, that's a test. And Wesley fails the test. And Picard, you can see him get disappointed. So he tries a different tack, tries to bring him around that way. And Wesley just will not give it, will not answer, and he's not going to rise to the moment. And that's when Picard loses patience with him and gets mad. And you see that for Wesley, he could live with disappointing Picard. He could live with Picard never knowing the truth. He absolutely cannot live with, oh, he knows. He absolutely knows, and he's mad at me about it. And now it's really, and that's the moment where Wesley, I think, decides, okay, I have to come clean. And it is one word when Wesley's entire everything changes in that. And he tries to he's been trying to manage the captain. He's been trying to keep him. Wesley's been thinking about Nick and trying to manage the captain and keep him away from the scene of the crime. And in that moment, in that one word, you see Wesley saying, I am in so far over my head. I don't want to do any of this. I desperately need your help. But you've just yelled at me and you're angry at me. And now I'm a 20-year-old man and I'm prideful and I absolutely am not going to take that risk. I guess I've kind of made my bed and I'm very uncomfortably lying in it. And it all happens with just that one word.
And that word
such a good reminder. It's Captain. He says at the end of that scene, he's like, Captain. And in all of that is I need help. Please, don't rat me out. He's just I'm so screwed, right? And I think that it just it sort of reinforces what you're saying. Um, as actors, we can do a lot with one word.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let me piggyback on what you just said about that scene with you and Patrick Stewart. It gave him the opportunity to give one of the best monologues I've seen, or speeches, when he
Mm-hmm.
defines what being a Starfleet officer is about, what wearing that uniform really is about, and that is
Yeah,
standing for truth, right? And he talks
yeah,
about we're standing for
yeah,
truth, all kinds of truths, historical truths, scientific truths. But he mentions that, and it really embodies, one of the long-lasting principles of what Star Trek is about. So I thought that was an opportunity.
yeah,
You gave him in that moment the opportunity, in his scolding of you, to actually lay out some of what we watched the show for. It's like, this is why we
yeah,
watch the show.
yeah. I love that he's telling you these are Starfleet values. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of a line in the pilot when Q puts humanity on trial. And by the way, it turns out that Q wasn't wrong. But there's this, there's that moment, right, where Picard said, "If you had earned that uniform you're wearing, you would know these things.
Mhm.
If you had the privilege of wearing that uniform instead of being a cosplaying dickhead, you would know this is how it goes. You're not wearing a uniform. You've got a bunch of spandex on you. It doesn't mean anything." And for Wesley to hear that admonition and that reminder that you're not just wearing a costume, dude. Um,
Yes.
that is a big, big, big moment for him. And I think that in a larger character arc way, now I didn't know this at the time, and I wonder if Ron Moore knew this because he also wrote, I think the title is Journey's End, where Wesley leaves with the Traveler. Ron had said, I had been feeling for years that Wesley wasn't a person who wanted to be in Starfleet, and we had kind of seen that happen over the years. And I thought this was a really wonderful way to kind of like wrap up his character. Um, and I can see that a seed is planted in this episode. I can imagine Wesley getting through all of this, and it's all when it's all done. And Picard tells him, like, "Look, you knew the right thing to do. I just had to remind you," or whatever it is he says. I can see Wesley walking out of that conversation and asking himself for the very first time, "Do I want to wear this uniform?"
Mhm.
Well,
Which is
Will,
just such an
sorry,
yes.
go ahead.
Yeah. That's an
I,
interesting question. I never thought about the moment after, where Will walking away thinking,
hmm.
yeah, I mean, I can understand that. Does Wesley want to be in Starfleet? And
Yeah,
but obviously you excelled really well because you made it part of the Nova Squadron. So you're in a high level. We know that you've served on
yeah,
Enterprise, so we've seen you in motion.
yeah,
And I just think that you played this great. The moment where you talk about Data, and when you find out Data and LaForge were working on their
That was
data,
great.
trying to reconstruct the data, and you kind of panic, like, oh shit, like,
They're gonna
yeah.
figure it
what?
out.
Oh, I'm extraordinarily fucked now.
Yeah, yes,
Wait a minute,
yes.
maybe I could go turn data off. Yeah,
Yeah, so the panic in your voice is great there. I just felt like you were the linchpin to all of the scenes, because there were great scenes and the guest actors were fantastic. You mentioned Robbie
yeah,
McNeil. You mentioned the woman who played the Admiral Brand. I thought
Yeah,
she did a fantastic
awesome.
job. The other cadets were great, and so were the regular actors, of course, Patrick Stewart. But the linchpin of all of that was your performance with each actor, and so we got to see your vulnerabilities here, but your also protectiveness here, your defensiveness here. So, as much as you think you played one tone, I think you played several tones, and I actually saw the nuance there. I saw you
oh,
trying to
thanks.
be part of the group here, being defensive here, being protective here, and then being exposed in some moments here and there. and then you had a redemption quality. I wish that Picard at the end kind of gave you more of a pat on the back, like you did the right thing type of "I'm proud of you" type of thing for standing up and saying that. I missed that, and I felt like it would have been a good push in the back for your character to say, you know what, I did do the right thing at the end of the day. And Picard could have said, "Don't worry about this. This will, you'll go on to forget about this, in your career." I think he could have given a more optimistic outlook for for your character, for Wesley. But at the end of the day, he did give that great speech, and I thought your performance was fantastic.
Agreed.
I really appreciate that.
And Will, I want to tell you very quickly that we only have you for another minute here. Already.
You've got me as long as you want. I've got nothing to do. If you want to keep me a little bit longer,
we're on a time crunch, but thank you.
About Star Trek.
But really, I mean, personally, this is one of my favorite and most iconic Next Generation episodes. It's certainly my favorite Wesley Crusher episode, and I feel like I first started watching The Next Generation in season 5. So I remember thinking, wow, this Wesley Crusher guy is awesome. Maybe I said radical.
Yeah.
And I was like, Nova Squadron, he's going to be a lieutenant one of these days. Wow, it's so cool.
Yeah.
So, I know we're all our own worst critics, but before we go, can you tell us what you hope people get from this episode? If there was one wish you could have, what could be people's takeaway from this episode?
How you deal with peer pressure really, really matters. There's a lot of different lessons that we can take out of this. We can look at the way Nick treats Wesley and the other cadets and how he manipulates all of them to try to save himself. That tells me that Nick Locarno's would be a bad Starfleet officer. He will never be the head of anything. He, like the captain, always takes responsibility for the entire crew. And if you're the leader of the squadron and your choice is to let the tragic loss of one of your friends be pinned on that person just to protect your career because you're ambitious, it just says to me, like, you're unfit. You're absolutely unfit for duty. And there's a real important lesson there about when you are given a leadership position, what do you do with it? You see Picard's leadership encouraging Wesley to tell the truth. You see Wesley's eventual leadership wrestling with this very difficult choice that he has to make, where he knows what the right thing to do is, but he just feels like, I'm going to disappoint somebody here. Who's it going to be? And what kind of disappointment can I live with? I think this is very much about the choices we make and the long-lasting consequences of those choices, way beyond the immediacy of what is happening, like immediately after the choice is made. And in a meta sense, I think it's a terrific reminder, and it serves this way for me as a person as I look at the way my life mirrors Wesley Crusher's life, right? We're like, we both grow up thinking this is what we're meant to do. And then we get to a point where we're doing it. We just doesn't feel right. It's not really what we want to do. And then there is an opportunity to wildly change directions and go after what feels right to me, not what I've been told is right for me. You can see that in this moment, and then it finally pays off in Journey's End. As I said, I could talk about this forever and ever and ever, and I know I'm not the only person you're talking to today. So,
well, we would love to have you come back for Journey's End, because that would
anytime, buddy, anytime. Of course,
the capstone on the pyramid, right there.
It's absolute. It's always, Rock. It's always my pleasure and my privilege to sit down and talk about this with you. And I never feel like we have enough time.
You give the most thoughtful answers too.
Yes,
I swear, it's awesome.
No.
We ask you a little question.
There is one.
Let me tell you.
There's wait. There's one thing that I put on my notes that I really wanted to call out because I thought it was a lovely, lovely, lovely moment that I had missed every other time I've seen this episode. I thought it was wonderful that Picard has these scenes with Boothby where he is like kind of trying to get Boothby to sort of like just talk to me about these kids on campus right now. And what Boothby is essentially saying is, you already know the answers to all of this. It's always the same. This is where you are at this moment in your life. And these kids are no different from you. Love that Boothby calls Picard son. He talks to Picard like Picard is still that kid who knew Boothby however many years ago. I thought it was this beautiful moment where we get to see Picard, who is always larger than life, who is always on a pedestal, who is so much taller and bigger than all of us. It is this moment where Picard is like with the guy who knew him before and doesn't have to do any of this, right? And he's like, dude, I remember when you were so wasted under this tree and like, you couldn't find your shoes and you were so worried that you were going to blow that test and I helped you out of it. Like, I don't even want to tell you how many times this Crusher kid has just gone out and gotten wrecked. Like lost his way back to the dorms. I loved that moment, and I love that it just going back to 1992 and episodic storytelling, moments like that build the background of our world in a way that we didn't get to do that an ongoing storyline does today. And I just really love that moment. I thought Ray Walston was fantastic. We were so lucky to have him for the episodes that we did. He was lovely too. I was so intimidated by him that I literally just showed up and shut up and just did my lines with him when I had scenes with him. I did not try to engage him in conversation.
Yeah,
that would have been like, so hey, on My Favorite Martian, did you listen to Joy Division?
Joy Division.
That makes sense, right?
Yes.
Like, it doesn't make any sense at all, right? But I would just would have been like, Transformers sure are cool, huh? Like, I don't know. Can you do the thing?
You would have been right about Transformers,
yeah,
though.
it was. It turns out that Ray Walston asked him Transformers. Yeah,
another great performer in this episode. I mean, this episode had a lot of great guest stars that delivered on this episode. I thought they were just phenomenal. I loved the cadets. I loved the judges, you know, and like you said, Ray Walston was amazing.
Totally. Well, Will, this has been
a special feature. I'll just tell you, and I know you're trying to get rid of me, and I'm going to go. There's a special feature on the Lower Decks DVD set where we do. It's in. There's a flashback to the Academy where we find out that Wesley and Mariner were at the Academy together, and Mariner was just totally a nerd and like a dork, and like didn't like him. And there's this really funny moment, like it's right before they're going to go do the Starburst thing, and the kid that plays Josh goes, "This is great! No, it's great! I'm going to live forever!"
Oh no! They cut that out.
Anyway, they got Robbie and me and Shannon Phil all together in a group chat to talk about working on the first duty. So if anyone wants to hear more about this episode, track that down. However, one would go about doing.
That's amazing.
And I really think that you'll enjoy it.
Wow, that's definitely
awesome
something we'll check out.
Thank you.
Will, thank you.
So much.
Thank you so much, Will.
This has been the coolest thing ever. We really appreciate you and your time and your incredibly thoughtful answers, Will. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Everybody, stick around. You know we got way more for you. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach frickin' Lofton.
Hello.
All right, here are the trivioids of the week. People have been clamoring for them. Captain Picard is delivering this year's commencement address to Starfleet Academy. Having a Vulcan superintendent is like having your parents around all the time. Wesley Crusher is allergic to metorapan treatments. Wesley's arm is a little sore. Captain Picard caught a Ligonian with a reverse body lift and pinned him in the first 14 seconds of a match. Wesley went to Calgary with Joshua Albert. And weeds keep popping up in the Pittosporum. Oh, and a lie of omission is still a lie. All right, lots of good stuff there.
Ah, I said a mouthful right there. Okay.
I know. A lot of weeds in the Pittosporum always. That is just a problem. Okay. So, as I may have mentioned in the first segment, who knows? I do remember this episode very well, but this was your first time watching this episode. I really feel like I first started watching Star Trek The Next Generation in the 5th season in syndication. You know, like whatever was running, it was in the 5th season when it was running, because these are all episodes that I remember watching. These last handful of episodes were the ones that I remember watching as like the first episodes. This one, Cause and Effect, and Conundrum, the one where there's like the imposter guy. Anyway, so this is a very memorable episode to me. I know it's one of the episodes that people talk about a lot. What do you think about it?
Well, some of the thoughts that I got, because I'm watching Star Trek in reverse, having watched Deep Space Nine first and now going back to Next Generation. It's interesting what correlates with my mind. And this made me think of the Red Squad Valiant episode of Deep Space Nine. And it made me think, right?
Similar name, right?
Right.
Red Squad, Nova Squadron. I get them confused.
So it was actually, it brought me back to that, just the idea of an elite group of Starfleet Academy students that have essentially broken off to do something on their own of some sort, right? Mm-hmm. To take initiative on their own because they have this status of elite, qualifications, and because of that, they also have arrogance, right? And arrogance that causes them to make miscalculations and bad judgment calls. And I feel like, wow, this felt like a little bit of the Red Squad episode. And also in that episode, Nog was conflicted with having to choose between his allegiance to the squad,
right,
and his allegiance overall to me, his friend, and his other family,
and what he believed to be right.
Right. So here it goes, this episode, and I thought Wil Wheaton did a fantastic job of playing the note of the conflict, because I think that's something that maybe is more often experienced for young people who feel peer pressure, maybe more so than adults would. But it still happens even in the situation with adults and coworkers, and being amongst a group of like-minded adults. If there's some kind of like code of honor that we don't rat on each other, we don't this, we don't that, right? And and there's always that kind of code of conduct amongst any kind of group that you see, right? There's some kind of unifying factor that, hey, look, we stand on these principles, and we don't do this to each other. And so I felt like that was played heavily in this episode, and well done, as far as the peer pressure of kind of not trying to rat somebody out, but also remain truthful to your morality and your upbringing and what you are about. And so Wil Wheaton, I thought, did a fantastic job of like trying to straddle the line of, basically having two masters. They say you can't obey two masters, right? Mm-hmm. And so in this case, he had two masters. Picard was his original, sensei master. And then here comes this Nick Locarno guy who I really was endearing. Like, it seemed like he was a guy you would like and hang out with. And he was just basically saying, cover for me, cover for me. You know what I mean? And all of us have covered for friends in different ways, and sometimes to our own detriment. Sometimes we cross our own principles, and sometimes we have to tell a lie. But to cover for a friend is kind of a normal thing to do, except when it now has all of this weight of consequence on it about, possibly getting expelled, possibly getting reprimanded, and finding your future, slip away in front of your eyes. So a lot of those things could be the consequences of those kinds of decisions.
Yeah. I really love this episode too. I've seen it a bunch of times, and it's just such a memorable and iconic Next Generation episodes. When I think of Star Trek: The Next Generation, this is one of the episodes that pops up, one of the 10 or 20. There's some real iconic ones. And part of what makes this so good, number one, is the evolution of the relationship between Picard and Wesley Crusher. It really has evolved. And it even gets highlighted when Picard says, when you first came on my ship, boy, I was,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But also this moral, play of, do you do what's best for not just your friends, but your team, your unit, whether that's the Enterprise, is Captain Picard's faced with that too. Do I save the Enterprise and everybody on it, or do I save this planet and everybody on it? You know what I mean? Like you're always, do you save the group that you're loyal to, or the bigger picture? And so it has that kind of theme. But then also what makes this episode really great is actually this picture, the guest stars. It's such a good guest star crew. Like there aren't what was her name? Jean Hajar right here. She doesn't have that many lines, but you get an idea of the kind of character she is. Sito Jaxa, the Bajoran. She doesn't have a ton of lines, but you get a really good sense and idea of who she is and what she's like. Nick Locarno has a few more. He was such a good character, played so well, that Tom Paris was based off of that on Voyager. And
I thought I recognized that guy.
Yeah. So that is Robbie Duncan McNeil. And legend has it that is the character in Voyager. But as Star Trek does, there's all like the rights to the writer that created it and this and that. They don't want to pay the royalties. So they really took, I'm sure it was when it was originally written, the concept for Voyager, they said Nicholas Locarno. But then at the end, they changed the name. But that, make no mistake, Tom Paris is this guy. This is Tom Paris in Voyager. It even picks up, where he's been kicked out of Starfleet Academy. He's kind of shunned by the Federation, and Janeway wants to give him a chance because he's the best pilot out there. It's this character, like the through and through. So it's a really good redemption story for him, and he plays it the same. It's that character, So we also, no spoilers, but we may or may not, in a future episode, see another character from this episode. So it actually really is a good touchstone or jumping off point for a lot more of Star Trek lore. So it's just a great episode all around. I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, and I want to speak to the fact why Robbie Duncan McNeil was so, why his performance eventually led to the kind of, rebirth of the character in Voyager. And this is something that we see on Star Trek, we've seen on Star Trek before, with several other characters, that have become instrumental in developing future characters. I think Ro Laren is also one of those characters as well, right?
Spot on, yeah. Same kind of thing.
So, same kind of thing. So, and I like, and what I think lends to that, because I've heard this in the profession of acting before, just in general, and without Star Trek, name attached to it. A friend of mine was on a show, guest starred on a show. The show was called Family Matters. Okay? And he guest starred in one episode.
You are so right. Jaleel White, yeah.
Yeah, Jaleel White, who eventually became Urkel, who eventually became the star of the show Family Matters, is synonymous with Urkel. Yeah, but Family Matters existed prior to Urkel existing. There was a Family Matters show.
But he did this. He made the ratings go like that.
Yes, he made the ratings go like that. He made the executives go like that. It's those situation comedies are done in front of a live studio audience, so you get to hear right away if the audience likes it or not, right? And aside from laugh tracks, when they really, really like it, You can tell. And executives are always present there. So they'll know, hey, this guy right here is getting a crazy response from the crowd. And that happened to Jaleel White. After the filming of that episode, they do like a curtain call in front of the audience. And the audience again went crazy for his Urkel character and performance. So what I'm saying for actors is there's no small role. And that's why when you do have an opportunity to get a role, to guest star in something or to feature in something, you have to make the most of that chance because you don't know what that opportunity could possibly lead to down the road. I'm sure, 100% sure, that Robbie Duncan McNeil did not think he would be a series regular on
Right.
another show several years later.
It was a job. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, you know,
Because you go in there and knock it out the park and you deliver such a great performance like he did with this Nick Locarno character, what I liked about his performance was that he delivered it with a sensitivity that didn't make me hate him and think he was a bad guy.
totally.
I was like, you know what? This guy's not a bad guy. He's, you know, he believes in his squad. These other two people, Gene and Cito, they're willing to go to bat for this guy. They think he's they think he's worth going to bat for. And so it must be something about it. He seemed like a good leader. He gave words of encouragement. He analyzed situations very well when he talked about, you know what, Picard probably gave you the speech about,
yeah.
intent. Yeah, it was very good. He was good.
And he walked the walk.
believable.
He didn't just talk the talk. When it was his time to sacrifice himself for the good of the team, he did do it. So it's one of those rare occasions where, you know, they make it impossible to dislike almost the villain type of character. He's almost like the antagonist character in a way, but he ended up being almost the most moral besides Wesley Crusher because he said, okay, let me take the whole fall. I was their boss. They're only following my orders. And, you know, that's a very redeeming quality for him. And just to your point earlier, you're right. That happens all the time. Like Ro Laren, who's to say Ro Laren was ever going to be more than one or two episodes? Jeffrey Combs playing Wei-Yun. Remember, he was only supposed to be one episode. And Ira, Stephen Bear, of course, was like, what have we done? He was so good and we killed the character. So they just kept bringing him back. Like, if you're so good, it's like a basketball player, right? Just be so good that the coach can't afford to take you off.
Yes.
And that's what this is. Frasier, there's a story about Kelsey Grammer, speaking of cause and effect, who there's a story where he went to a bar and he was super excited. He's like, I just got a 4-episode deal on Cheers. Like, not a lot of lines, but he was going to get 4 episodes. And that was going to be like the big thing because he's dating Diane. But they just kept bringing him back. Then he got his own show. And then he got another one of his own shows more recently. So, yeah, it always happens where or look at Chief O'Brien. Same thing. Chief O'Brien he didn't even have a name in the first episode, the pilot episode. He was like Battle Bridge Lieutenant, I think his name was. Battle Bridge Lieutenant. And then they just liked him so much, they brought him back, and then made him a lead in the next series. So, yeah, I agree. And
so make the most of your opportunity when you have an opportunity as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at it and say, well, you know, I'm not the star of the show, or this is just a guest star role, or don't minimize whatever that thing is because you don't know what it will lead to. And not only that, but remember, Ira Bear, speaking of Ira, mentioned hiring actors from something he had seen them do in something else
all the time.
10 years ago, 5 years, and it might be the most obscure thing, you know. And here you are getting hired again based on, you know, something else. And
that's
so
how
that's
Sid
why
got the job, was because they saw him in a play.
Exactly. So basically, always give it your best. Always, you know, do your best to perform. And if you leave a lasting impression like these examples, you're going to get an opportunity to shine. And you never know how big that shining opportunity is going to be. Like in the case of Kelsey Grammer, who
totally
turned 4 episodes into probably 400 episodes.
Yeah. And I wanted to point out Commander Albert, you know, the dead guy's dad.
Yes.
He really had some good moments. Like they picked a great actor for him because I was able to feel his pain and his shame and his, regret, like through his performance. He would just like look like a man that was carrying this heavy burden of like, oh, my son wasn't good enough and he almost killed these other people. Like not only just losing his son, but also like, oh my God, he could have killed more. Like that guy, I felt so bad for that guy. I was like, this guy is performing the hell out of this. They picked the right guy. So shout out to that actor. Let me get his name actually real quick. His name is Ed Lauter. Ed Lauter, great actor.
Yeah, he was fantastic, and the way the dialogue was written for him was really great. When he says, you know, "I'm sorry that he let you down."
Mm-hmm.
He said, he tells Will, he tells Crusher, "I'm sorry that he let you down." And I'm like, here it is. This guy lost his son, apologizing to the guy that's lying about it. And, that also speaks volumes to what everybody wants in life, and that is some closure,
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular father's case, the closure was going to be that his son was negligent and be acting, irresponsibly, flying irresponsibly prior to that. So it would have been a, a poor reflection on his end days, which made it look like he was somebody that he wasn't, which was not responsible or negligent or acting inappropriately or not capable of, you know, flying formations or whatnot. And so that kind of thing would have reflected poorly on the legacy of his son's life. And I thought that also kind of had a tone that was highly emphasized when the father apologized, because it showed that the father had integrity. It showed that he came from a family that had this kind of integrity, that they were, willing to even apologize that there was a possibility that somebody else could have gotten hurt, right? So that lets you know the upbringing of this Joseph Alpert guy. So I thought that that was well written and well done. I did feel the sensitivity of the moment by the father's portrayal.
Yeah, and another great performance. They're just everywhere. This whole episode is just great performances, and that's a big shout out to director Paul Lynch. To be able to extract that, and to the writers Ronald D. Moore and Naren Shanker, who were able to write these words that inspire these performances. But it was Gates McFadden as Beverly Crusher, when she was kind of in denial in a way, when she found out that Wes almost died, but he was okay. He had some burns. He had a fractured arm, in a couple places. And she just kind of, it felt so human of her to just say, oh, he's allergic to this medicine, but they probably would end up using this, but I better send them this and that. It was just like, she's almost protecting herself by getting clinical, and that is so much more interesting writing than, oh my God, Wesley, are you okay? I'm so sad. I'm so scared. Like maybe, I mean, that's realistic too, but it's much more interesting to see somebody fighting their emotions and struggling with them rather than just blurting them out, Like if somebody,
it speaks to her level of professionalism, what we've come to know as her character. She's somebody who deals with trauma. She deals with in emergency room situations where you have to be cool and level-headed in the face of gory, things that you see. And I just think it speaks to who she is as a character. Well, we already know that she is. I also thought she gave a great performance when she had her moment with her son, and she was saying, I'm gonna protest this, and I'm gonna do that. And Will looked at her and was like, Mom, Mom, don't do this. Don't go to bat for me on
that
this.
was a sticky situation for him where he's like, oh, please, you're just making me feel worse right now.
Yeah, he's like, Mom, please, no, stop. And then he says to her, don't try to protect me. And she kind of looks like, the look she has on her face is great. It's amazing. It's like, it's like, oh, there's more to this than I think I know, and something's wrong here. And it just was amazing how she just the look she gave as a performer in that moment, I thought was fantastic. So yes, kudos to her. This whole thing was great, great acting performances. I think Picard was a fantastic. I think Patrick Stewart was amazing in this episode.
Oh yeah.
I loved his investigatory not moments. I loved his Boothby. Like Boothby was great.
He was awesome too. Yeah.
You
Such
know,
a great
this
character actor, that guy.
that guy was amazing. I love the scenes with Boothby, and I loved when Picard actually showed some humility and began to thank Boothby for the things that he had said to him and the advice he gave him while he was a student that he didn't appreciate at the time because he thought he was a mean old man. And I thought that's great writing, because that's kind of the karmic cycle that Wesley's now caught into, right?
But the worst was
Because
when he said, I was a mean old man and I'm the same age that you are
yeah,
now. I was like, oh, nobody wants it. Because we
uh,
know that when we remember being kids watching a show
yeah,
and be like, that was the old guy on the show. And we're
yeah,
that age or older than the old guy on the show. Remember,
yeah,
nobody wants to hear that mess,
yeah,
man. Uh,
yeah. He got him right back with that. It was great. It was a
you
great
know,
comebacks, great scene.
and Boothby actually comes back for 2 more episodes in Voyager, actually, as Boothby. So that's really cool. Very likable and charming actor, Ray Walston, who passed away 24 years ago, actually. Boy, how did he squeeze in Voyager? Yeah, I guess a couple of years before.
Well,
So that was great. But speaking of great performances, I think we are already, if you can believe that, oh my God, the Admiral, what was her
yeah,
name? Admiral Brand.
Brand,
Admiral
yeah,
Brand. She did this amazing
fantastic.
performance. Like, not just the character she was playing, but when she realized they were lying to her, when he said, like, I choose not to answer. And she was just like she almost had like that quiver in her voice where she's like so mad and so
Hmm.
disappointed and so hurt and disgusted that she's just like, man, I could feel it. I could hear it in her
Yeah,
voice. I was like,
it,
wow, what a
even
great,
yeah.
amazing actress. Unbelievable.
And when she was grilling, one of those cadets, Jean or Cito, I forgot, and she says to her, "I didn't ask you that question.
Yeah.
Like you gave me
Cito.
an answer that I didn't. You just went off and flew off and just went off and gave me an answer to something that I trying to excuse something that I didn't ask you about. So it looks very guilty on your part." And Cito was like, "Oh shit, I'm kind of let me correct the yes sir, no sir, you're right sir," and corrected the way she was communicating the information. But yeah, I love the way the Admiral was like, "Hold on a second, I didn't ask you that."
Unbelievable actress. I was like
Yeah.
blown away by her. At first, I just thought, okay, standard hard ass Admiral character.
No.
But as the episode progressed, I was like, oh boy, she's got layers in there. She's really good. But speaking of all that, God, we could talk about this episode forever. It's already time for the home run of the episode. Good luck on this one, Sirach. Who gets the home run of today's episode?
Look, I think everybody really is fantastic in this episode. Um, I'm going to give it to Wil Wheaton. I just think that he was the linchpin of this. He had to balance a performance with his mother. He had to balance the performance with his cadet squad leader,
Mm-hmm.
and he also had to balance his performance with Picard. And I thought, and also the judges that were on trial. So I thought he gave such a subtle nuance. Each one of them got a little bit of Wil Wheaton that was slightly altered for that moment. That I get that it was just enough differences there where he talks to his mom, you can see in a different way. He has the respect for Picard. He looked at Locarno as somebody he wanted to be emulate and be like, but he also felt like there was a character flaw in him because he was willing to cover up so bad. So all of that processing in Wesley Crusher's head, I thought was done well. it was amazing for me, and I think he deserves the home run as the main guest star in this episode.
Yeah, I agree. You know that he's got an amazing performance when I can't stop blathering about how amazing all these guest stars are, and he still is the easy choice for me in a lot of ways. Like, it's just kind of like he just also had an amazing performance, but he had a much bigger load to carry. So, Superstar, maybe his best performance of the series, possibly. You know, they certainly gave him more to work with in this episode. So definitely Wil Wheaton, home run of the episode. And here are some people that also know about performing. Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom, TJ, Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Muller, Dr. Muhammad Noor, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Goo, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, aka Crewman Guy, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, who's gallivanting around Italy right now, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Chris Sternett, Greg K. Wickstrom, Cassandra Gerard, Chuck A., Chris Garris, and of course, Jason M. Oaken. All right, everybody, stick around, like Thorin Oakenshield of the Hobbit lore. Stick around, everybody. We'll be right back with the free-for-all on the Seventh Rule. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton. This is the free-for-all with Melissa Longo.
Hello.
And Jason M. Oaken, cool background.
Hi, everybody.
Eve England is back in town. Well, her town. She's here. Faith Howell is on the bridge of the Enterprise D. 1997 Altered Beast champion Greg Kenzo is here. It's a video game. Chuck A has the cool, awesome, tons of stuff on his wall.
Hello.
Allison Leach Hyde sporting the acting ensign, awesome shirt. Carrie Schwent's got an awesome shirt of her own, aka Crafty Bear. And Chris McGee reminds us to lay low and what is the prosper? Okay, great. Walking art made by Melissa. So is Greg Kenzo's. All right, Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
This might be like an 8.1.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
Probably higher than that.
8.4.
I think this is the one. It's going to be a 10.
I'm with Sirach. Yeah,
I'll say 7.7.
it's up there.
7.9.
7.9, 7.7.
Is there an of in there?
8.5. Bates says a 10.
8.3.
I think you guys tickled all around the perimeter, but didn't quite nail it unless I missed it.
All right.
It's kind of naughty.
Yeah. What are we talking about, Ryan?
Numbers. What do we ever talk about? Numbers. Cold, hard numbers with a decimal point in between them.
What's the number then?
Well, the number is a 7.8.
Oh.
Oh.
I heard 7.7, 7.9, right? We were all over the place. All right. Did we have any non-appearance mentions? What do you guys think of Joshua Albert as a non-appearance mention? Because did we see him in the Lower Decks episode?
We did see him in the Lower Decks episode.
Nailed it. Good job, Melissa.
I did a little digging. He didn't say anything, but we
he
did
was there.
see him. Yes. Yes.
And that was an appearance non-mention on Lower Decks. Wow,
Yes.
That is a cool one. So let me confirm that. Okay. Even Jason's impressed by that one. Do we have any others? That was the only one I could think of.
There was one in the script that I'll mention later that did not make it onto the screen.
Ooh. You mean like next week you'll tell us? Or
No, this episode.
Okay. Some kinds of or some sorts of, Chris McGee?
For the 4th episode in a row, no. Afraid not.
All right.
Mm.
Well, Melissa Longo, please get us started off on the right track by letting us know what you thought of this particular episode.
I thought it was definitely higher than a 7.8. It was a pretty good episode, and I like that they had doors that opened. I just noticed that. I was like, well, he's opening the door. But and we get our first look at the Japanese gardens, and we get our first taste of Boothby. Woohoo! I'm so excited to see him, and I loved his advice to Picard because it felt like a passing down of wisdom. So Boothby exposed, or no, I'm losing the words, gave his little kernels of wisdom to Picard, and then Picard in turn gave his kernels of wisdom to Wesley, which was wonderful. And I like that this episode highlights how easily it is to get taken in by someone who is charming and really nice. And even the smartest people can be, taken in by somebody who may not have the best of intentions.
Like who?
Well, there's many examples of this in the world. But it's easy to do, and I do like that at the end there was a twist to Nick Locarno's character as far as taking responsibility for being the leader of his group, and taking the full brunt of the punishment, really, and getting expelled. That surprised me because when he was talking to Wesley and he said, I would take one for the team. I would go down with the ship. I was like, no, you wouldn't. And then I heard, that he did. And I was like, well, I'm so glad that I was wrong because you never know about people. And then my favorite line in this was from Boothby when he said to Picard, what happened to your hair?
So rude.
Yeah,
It was great.
I say that all the time.
What happened to your hair?
Yeah, Sprock, what happened? Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Picard didn't like that much. It's a little.
He didn't laugh for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, he didn't laugh at that joke.
Well, great stuff as always, Melissa, making us laugh. That's for sure. Jason M. Oken is here. No laughing allowed. What do you got for us today, Jason?
Well, I mean, First Duty is probably the most grounded episode of The Next Generation, maybe the most grounded episode, certainly one of the most grounded episodes of Star Trek, literally, because pretty much it takes place on Earth. It's almost like a procedural that could have been done outside of the Star Trek context. It is something that relates and applies to everyday lives, and I understand it's been used as a teaching tool in terms of showing what you should do and in honesty and truth in making hard choices. I mean, the fact that Wesley, as a character, has been put in this position and is not sort of this, for the first time we see him as not necessarily this pristine character that there's certainly shades of gray to him. Does the character some favors, especially with the reputation that the character developed as a regular on the series. And I think it certainly gave Wil Wheaton something to chew on as an actor, and I think he did a marvelous job. I think it was again, visually there's not a lot here, so it's carried by the story, it's carried by the acting, and I think again, Wil Wheaton, Robbie, I think did a wonderful job, and so did Patrick. There were a few choices that Patrick made that were a little bit different than scripted, but they certainly came out on top. I'll just give you one example. I mean, so the main speech of the episode that comes toward the end, where Picard basically lectures Wesley in the ready room about the first duty of every Starfleet officer is the truth. The way it's scripted, Patrick's supposed to come very close to Will and just almost whisper this. That's not how it was delivered. It was delivered sort of as this powerful speech, and I think it's a much better choice. It came off very well, and you basically stop and you listen because the command in Patrick's voice is something that captivates you. That's what makes him such a great actor, and it's a lesson I think that everybody should learn. Sometimes we do have to make some very, very hard choices. And I think this episode stands out for that. And kind of overall, I think it's the best use of Boothby, frankly, in the series. In Star Trek, he appears a couple of more times, but this is exactly, I think, frankly, where they should have left him, because he's used to perfection. It's sort of how the Next Generation he has used Guinan in little sort of spots where it belongs to kind of make a point. Too much, and it's way too much. But this is just right. So it's a wonderful episode beginning to end. There's a lot more to talk about, anything from those wonderful doors to some things that didn't make it onto the screen, but I'll save that for later.
What? Keeping us in suspense a little longer even. Thank you very much, Jason M. Oaken. All right, Eve England is out in Wales. She loves baseball and Barry Bonds. What do you think of this episode?
Yeah, I mean, this was really, really good. I mean, I just felt like the last couple of episodes have just been pretty mediocre. I was getting a bit fed up with some of the recent episodes, but this one really was. It just jumps out as being a much better episode. I mean, it just shows how they do the sort of the courtroom sort of morality play really, really well. That's where everything shines, all the different characters shine, the story, the sort of the ethics, all of that stuff just comes together. And I just thought it was a gripping episode. You were just enthralled by it from start to finish, as Jason just kind of mentioned. I mean, again, similar point again, it was really interesting to see Wesley in this shocking situation where he was involved in this cover-up, where he'd been this golden boy for as long as we've known him. And I think it was just really interesting to use this episode then as a sort of showing how Wesley's kind of had to mature. He's had to take a step back, look at his actions, take responsibility for his actions, and try and make the right decision. And then it was a perfect way, I think, with Boothby to bring Picard into it, because otherwise I'm not sure how Picard coming into it would have kind of worked in a sort of seamless, natural way. But I thought, the way that they used Picard as this sort of father figure and guidance figure for Wesley, and we sort of see that full cycle of when he was first then, and how we have Picard at the start. And we all know how I really hated Picard at the start, but he was just shouty all the time. He was just, whereas I think, he, like I said, he has that tone and that sort of really powerful speech. And it really, that's really what I was expecting to see from Picard, as opposed to what we saw at the start, where he was just always shouting at someone. And that just made it so powerful. His disappointment in Wesley was just palpable. And I thought that was a really, really good scene. And it sort of brought everything to life. One final point that I really found interesting is the Locarno character. I found was interesting because, like Melissa said, it was interesting. I wasn't expecting him to do the right thing at the end and help his classmates. And I just kind of thought it would be interesting, though. The question that we now get from Lower Decks is, okay, well, what might have happened had Wesley not done the right thing? What would have actually happened to Locarno then? Because it obviously he spirals and goes out of control. Whereas actually maybe he would have ended up being, I don't know, or whether his faults might have made him not to be the sort of optimum officer ultimately. But I think the Lower Decks episode has kind of given a different perspective to his character than probably what we come away from by just watching this episode. But yeah, overall, I thought this certainly should have been in the high 8s or 9s, because it seemed to be a really well-contained episode based on what we've seen over the last couple of episodes, especially.
Wow, high praise. That's really cool. It's always great to hear your perspective as a first-time viewer. So maybe that means this is an episode that deserves a little more love nowadays. Thank you very much, Eve England, out in Wales. Faith Howell doesn't need to give it more love. She's been telling us this since the beginning of the season. She's like, you guys, there's good stuff here. What do you think of this one?
Now, Eve, when you said the last few have been mediocre, you're not actually watching all the episodes with us, right? Because this is like clearly the best season.
Golden age.
Well, that's what I was expecting. The last few have been. I'm not going to say what I was thinking.
we need you back. I need to hear these opinions.
Things
every
left
week.
unsaid.
We can argue about it. So yeah, again, I think this continues our streak of fantastic fifth season episodes. I love how we basically have Tom Paris's backstory in a nutshell. I know it's not Tom Paris, but you know, it's Tom Paris. I actually, since, you know, we're all going to say about the same thing about how awesome this episode is. I was watching after work, so I made sure I got it in before the boys started jumping on me. And one of my coworkers came in and she's like, "Oh, can I watch it with you?" And I'm like, yeah, of course. And so I did like the last quarter of the episode, so I had to back it up and tell her, explain how it goes. And I didn't realize how many plug points I had to go into about the Maquis and, you know, the beginning of Voyager and all of the different things that this connects to in explaining to her what's going on just in this one little snippet of episode. So I really enjoy that. And, you know, we've got Cito Jaxa introduced here and just a lot of really fun things happening in this episode beyond just what we see for this week. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite episodes.
Love it. Thank you very much, Faith Howell. We can always count on you to praise season 5. We're almost to the end of it, though, unfortunately. Greg Kenzo hates season 5, but what do you think of this episode?
I definitely don't hate season 5. There are pretty bad episodes in it, but this one was amazing. I have to say, this one was like Eve said, a morality play that was so well played, and it didn't come off as a morality play. It was more like a law procedural almost. You had Wesley dealing with all these emotions. I do have a couple things I wanted to add because the philosophies I took away are our mistakes don't define us. Honesty is the best policy, and the truth will out always. It might not be when you want it to be, but in the end, truth will out. I didn't always think this way, and I think it's episodes that like this that made me start thinking this way, you know, that taught me when I was younger. I was reckless like these cadets in this episode, like Picard used to be. I think kids should actually make mistakes, not at the expense of people's lives, like what happened here, but ego gets in the way and makes us do crazy things, especially when we're younger, hormones and all that stuff. So my hot take here is Locarno shouldn't have been expelled from Starfleet, suspended for a couple years, or maybe 4 years, whatever. I think what happens to Paris is what, you know, but it shouldn't take those circumstances for Paris's reinstatement, like an admiral father and, you know, Janeway coming to see Paris to get him back. It shouldn't take that much for a good officer, you know, someone that's essentially good at heart to get back into Starfleet. Forgiveness should be just as important as truth. And that's our duty should be to forgiveness as well as truth. Yeah, so Locarno deserved a little better, I think. Yeah.
That is a hot take.
That's what I have to say.
Good stuff.
Is that?
It is a hot take. Thank you very much. Greg Kenzo out in Hawaii. All right, Chuck A, nowhere near Hawaii, but still chilling. What do you think of this episode?
Well, it was interesting the way the episode started because, well, they were headed towards the to Earth, and he was going to do the commencement speech, and then it turned into this another courtroom episode. I really loved the interplay with Admiral Brand and Wesley and Beverly getting his mother getting back together and trying to tell him everything's going to be okay, and then of course Picard convincing him to tell the truth at the end. The one I like Melise was saying, I really love Boothby and his talk with Picard and what happened to your hair deal. But that was played by Ray Walston, who was the Martian and My Favorite Martian in the 60s TV, where he was in the show with Bill Bixby. Of course, Bill Bixby went on to The Incredible Hulk. One of my favorite shows of that era. And Ray Walston also had a movie career. I believe he was in the movie Damn Yankees, which was like a musical. But the episode really came to the point at the end where Wesley, at the very last second, decided to own up on the mistake, and then Tom Paris, Nick Locarno, finally admitted it at the end. So really one of my favorite episodes, especially being one of the best episodes when Wil Wheaton came back to the show.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff there. Thank you very much, Chuck A. And the slip of the tongue. Oops. Yeah. Allison Leach Hyde is here in the heart of New Mexico. What do you think of this one?
I like this episode. It's a good story. It is a good morality play. Everyone acts very, very well in it. So it's an easy one to watch. You get sucked in. Like, you're like, okay, from the beginning that Wesley is kind of hiding something when Beverly and Picard walk into his room, because like he's not behaving like our Wesley. And yeah, his friend died, but he's not particularly behaving sad. He's more like, oh God, what have I done? So I thought that was really well done. I have a little nitpick that I'm sharing right now because it's been bothering me since the start of the episode, is why did the superintendent call Picard and not Beverly when Wesley was hurt? I'm like, no. He's not the emergency contact. That's the mom. So that's like, that just put me on edge. Like in the beginning, I'm like, why is she calling up Picard and going, you're a family friend, right? I'm like, no, call the mom. They could have just switched those scenes around, like have the Admiral call Beverly and then Beverly go and tell Picard what happened. Like, should have been switched. So I had the mom hackles raised right there. So I have to get that out. And I do love that Beverly is like there for her son. Like, we're going to fix this. This is great. This is not the end of the world. Like, you're okay. Yes, it's sad. But also I thought her going, well, you never lie. I'm like, oh, well, now we know he's lying because you just said it in the show. And as a mom of children, yeah, they are going to lie at some point, but you're still there to, not because they're never going to lie. You're there because you're their parent and you want to help them through a situation. So those are like my little nitpicks about this, but it is very well acted. I barely took any notes because I was just sucked into the story. So never skip this one.
Excellent, as always, Allison Leach Hyde. All right, Carrie Schwent, you are on the bay in San Francisco. Explain yourself and how are you? What'd you think of this one?
This is a fantastic episode, and it's baseball season, and the episode is set in San Francisco, and I've been to the Giants Park, so I'm like, okay, I know exactly what my background is going to be, and I love the Coke bottle, which at night games is all lit up, and there are entrances inside of it. If you zoom in really close, there are like slides for kids to slide down on. And apparently they told us they used to let adults go down the slide, but they don't let adults anymore. So just the kids, unfortunately, or else I probably would have gone down that slide. But yeah, that park is very, very cool. And we all know I love what's a Crusher. I am a member of the unofficial fan club. And yeah, I love Wesley's a great character, and this episode in particular, I know, shows that yes, he's smart, he's talented, but he's also a teenager, and like Allison was, teenagers, make mistakes. And my son, who's now 24, so his teenage years at about the age Wesley is in this episode aren't all that long ago. So I still sort of remember that, and that's why this episode definitely hits differently as a mom whose kid was a teenager not all that long ago, and you can see how she loves her kids, so she's desperate to the point of almost, from my perspective, gaslighting herself. Like, no, she's desperate for any explanation other than that her kid lied. She doesn't want to believe it. But yeah, I thought she was, the little peck on the cheek when she's leaving. I just thought, or on his forehead, I thought was just super sweet. And speaking of that bedroom, like Melissa was pointing out with the door, it's a good thing Worf didn't accompany them to visit Wesley, because as we all know, and I've pointed out before, manual doors are one of Worf's mortal enemies. They flummox him every single time he comes across one. I had to point it out. But it wouldn't be me if I didn't gush on the guest stars a little bit. The Vulcan Admiral, I recognized, he about 20 years ago, he spent a couple of years on General Hospital. And he was fantastic. A fairly minor recurring role, but he was very, very good in that. And he is also in an episode of my comfort food television wise, Gilmore Girls, in a fun little Christmas episode. And we have, of course, our beloved Robert Duncan McNeil. And this past cruise, we finally got him on the cruise, and I was actually able to thank him in person for inspiring the idea to do the haikus to start off with, and now the limericks. I've gotten to talk to Garrett about it a couple of times, and I finally got to tell Robbie in person. So that was a great moment for me. But yeah, I'm very glad that they changed the traits and created Tom Paris, because as presented between this episode and Lower Decks, Nick Locarno isn't necessarily someone I want around our B'Elanna Torres. Although if he tried anything, she would absolutely kick his fanny all the way back to the Alpha Quadrant. And also, and Eric noticed, because we watched the Lower Decks episode too, the jacket Locarno is wearing, there's a pattern on it. That is the pattern of the Starburst.
Holbird Starburst?
Yeah.
Cool.
I keep thinking I know how to pronounce that word, and every time I try to say it, I'm like, okay, how do I say it again? But yeah. And you've all heard me mention the X a time or two, and the gaslighting that Locarno was shining all around at everybody is the kind of thing the other guy was very, very good at. So it hit a little bit differently this time. Every scene he's in, I'm like, just stop. Okay. I don't like Locarno at all. I love Tom Paris much more. But last one I'll mention before I get, which will lead into the limerick, is Ray Walston. I adore him. I think he's adorably grouchy. Boothby is adorably grouchy. The character he plays in the original miniseries for Stephen King's The Stand, that character is a slightly lesser degree of adorably grouchy. And I also remembered, and IMDb confirmed, that he is in one episode of, Ryan, can you guess what show I'm about to mention?
Yeah, you're going to say Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
Precisely.
Oh my goodness, I must be psychic.
I know, right? that character, that character, he's a little bit, not quite dementia, but kind of something similar to like Alzheimer's, and Dr. Mike ends up helping him. He turns out he's the dad of the guy who runs the barber shop. Sweet character. But yeah, Ray is adorably grouchy. And when I pointed out to to Eric that he was in My Favorite Martian, he had the same look on his face, Ryan, that you had when Chuck mentioned it. He goes, "Oh yeah." Now, I've never watched My Favorite Martian, but from what I've heard, it's a fun show, and I think I saw Peacock has it, so I might get around to watching that every now and then. I've got one thing for Things Left Unsaid, but obviously for the limerick, I had to go with Boothby and his awesome sagely wisdom, and he's like the bartender of Starfleet Academy. Everybody goes to him for advice. So here it goes. I do so much more than just tend the grounds. There have been many of whom I am proud. A few just needed a nudge. It was not my place to judge. I help them see the right path can be found.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you very much, Carrie Schwent, a.k.a. Crafty Bear. All right, Dark Lord, Chris McGee is here. Lay low and prosper. What do you think of this one?
Well, I agree with everyone else. This is a fantastic episode, and it's an important keystone moment in The Next Generation, but I won't say any more about that. I'm sure everyone here and those watching and listening already know by now the story of how Nicholas Carno character was originally slated to appear on Star Trek Voyager, so I won't go retell that story. It's a good thing Mr. Locarno doesn't reappear as a supervillain in a later Star Trek show or anything. Like everyone else, I thought it was interesting that the dormitories don't appear to have the budget for automatic sliding doors. And after hearing about Boothby in last season's episode Final Mission, we finally get to see him. Turns out he's sort of like the Guinan of Starfleet Academy. Picard is really lucky in that he's befriended two wise old people. We did get a brief J sighting in engineering. Hooray! And I have a couple of quotes from Nicholas that stood out to me. At one point, Nicholas Carno, that is, at one point, Nicholas says that all of the flight recorded data they recovered was before the collision. Well, yeah, I would imagine the data after the collision, if it even survived, would be kind of pointless, wouldn't it? Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. Then later on, Nick says to Wesley, we have to hang on just a little bit longer. Then this will all be over. What he fails to account for is that Wesley's relationship with Picard, Geordi, Data, and even his own mother would be irreparably damaged, and a guilty conscience will never be over. Locarno even says that he has no moral difficulties about it, which just goes to prove that he's a high-functioning sociopath. The memorable quote of the episode, I have to go with Boothby, of course, on this one. You knew what you had to do. I just made sure that you listened to yourself.
Excellent. So good that Picard repeated it later. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Dark Lord Chris McGee. We are also joined, thank goodness, Southeast Texas' own Chris Garris. What'd you think of this one?
Oh, this is one of the great episodes of the series, especially of season 5. It's hard to see Wesley to lie because it's Wes. I know we're talking he doesn't lie, but he's like a young man. So, but it is hard to see that he actually went along with Nick's, scheme, and that it took Picard to finally basically not beat about of him, but really browbeat him and make him honestly just make him feel like crap to finally confess. But also I still want to know. I love the banner at the beginning between Riker and Picard when they're talking about their superintendents and how Riker had a Vulcan and Picard had a Betazoid, and I kind of wonder though. It might be a little illegal for him to be reading your mind already when you come in, because like you said, he didn't have to tell you what he did because he already knew. And actually, as I was listening to everybody, I hadn't actually even thought about the whole, Admiral calling Picard instead of Dr. Crusher. And I see what y'all are saying now. It kind of, it makes more, it doesn't make sense. And it was interesting, of course, as soon as he told her, she went straight to a little bit of mom mode and doctor mode. because she's like, okay, well, he's allergic to this, they should have that on file, but oh wait, maybe I should send it anyway, so she was full mom there. And I know he's not Tom, but I had said we have a young Tom Paris, but I just can't unsee that no matter what. And I really did love the interaction between Boothby and Picard. Of course, I know y'all already talked about, he gives him a hard time about no hair. And I want to know what he did. And they don't ever say. And I didn't look up. No, this should have been back in like season 2. So this wouldn't be a spoiler. I just wondered if it might have something to do with what caused him to get his artificial heart. I don't know if that's what they're talking about, but who's to say? So anyway, I don't know why they thought they'd be able to cover this up. There's no way. There's always going to be a censor somewhere that's going to, find, see what they did. And I like how they're like, "Are you sure that's what really happened?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then click, and so explain that. And they were caught. One thing I will say that I'd kind of forgotten about it until I watched it again. I think it's just kind of crap. It was really crappy for them to blame the other teammate for causing the accident. That's I don't think I could have gone on with that, because that's just a bunch of malarkey. And so I'm just going to leave it for that for now. But it's a great episode. It's definitely one that you do not skip. There's others you can skip. This isn't it.
Oh, I'd like to find out what those episodes are on the other side and things left unsaid. But for now, Jake's final take. What'd you think of this episode? Final thoughts, Sirach?
Well, I was going to say I didn't get a chance to really give Ronald Moore credit, because I think Ronald Moore writes some really amazing episodes, and this is another evidence of that. This is just well written, and the story really uses a lot of characters well, and so we got some good performances in this. I kind of wanted to see a little bit more congratulations from Picard when Wesley actually did kind of come up and speak the truth. He didn't really give him like, I'm proud of you, Wesley, for doing that. You did the right thing. I didn't hear enough of that to kind of positively reaffirm that, you did the right thing. Instead, it was more like, the punishment is going to be this and that. And there wasn't much there to Wesley. Like, I'm proud of you. You did the right thing. Don't worry about it. Things are going to work out. This blemish on your record will one day move on, and people will forget about it. There are elements of this episode that remind me of Nor the Battle to the Strong, in the fact that, just being conflicted with what really happened and what people perceive happened. So I think that was one of the things that I liked. Locarno might actually, given other circumstances, I know that this was a kind of the big showmanship kind of ego play, but there were elements of his character that would make him a great leader. And I think Boothby articulated that when he said that these guys would follow him and they would do anything for him. And so there were leadership qualities about him, I think, and elements of the way he performed the character that were kind of likable. It was like, just tell this little lie and nobody will be hurt except for somebody who's dead. And, I can see young people trying to do that. So it's not outside of the realm of, it doesn't make him a bad person is what I'm saying. It makes him it's a person, he just made a bad decision, but he's not necessarily a bad person. This also episode kind of touched upon something that, growing up, we always used to believe that if you don't tell the truth, if you don't say anything about it, then it's not technically lying, right? It's like we're just omitting what happened. I'm not telling you exactly everything. So unless you happen to ask the exact perfect right question, you're not going to get the truth out of me. And that is, the lie by omission is still a lie. Yeah, that's one of the great things that they touched upon in this episode. And you can see who that lie would hurt. It hurt the legacy of this kid who passed away, and it would also hurt the father who has to carry on the memory of his son. And now, with this lie, would be his incompetence, as opposed to, being put in some kind of harmful, dangerous position. So I think that was a great subject matter to explore in this episode. And then lastly for me was the speech that Picard gave. I thought was one of the greatest speeches I've heard in this show. And certainly a lasting memory for me as far as identifying what Star Trek values are about. And I think he defines that very well in this speech. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth, whether it's scientific truth, historical truth, or personal truth. It is the guiding principle on which Starfleet is based. And then he goes on to say, now, if you can't find it in yourself to stand up and tell the truth about what happened, you don't deserve to wear that uniform. And that's why I wanted to see Picard at the end kind of give him a pat on the back and say, you do deserve to wear the uniform. You did the right thing. And, let this go behind you and move forward. So a little bit more of that would have been great, but I definitely like to see Picard acknowledge his own character flaws when he said, when I first met you, you annoyed me and I couldn't stand you. Perfect. Great. Finally he's admitting his own thing that I didn't like about him, but he admits it. And I thought that was great. And to see the evolution of where he's come, to talk about how, I haven't been disappointed in you, but now I am, kind of put the pressure of that moment on him. So all around, really great acting, I thought, by Patrick Stewart. And of course, Wil Wheaton played a lot of moments very well. Some nonverbal moments. For example, when the other cadets were testifying and he knew that they were lying, he had the look on his face like, oh God, like, we're really trying to get away with this. And I felt his kind of tension and his anxiety really well expressed in those scenes. So overall, I really like this episode. I think it's a classic episode. I think it's one of the best episodes out there, top tier episode, and definitely worth a rewatch.
Nice. Very good. Very high praise. All right, everybody. That's it for us. Unless you're going over to the things left unsaid, then we'll see you there. If we don't, however, thanks so much for hanging out with us. And thank you to Chris Garris, Chris McGee, Carrie Schwent, Allison Leach Hyde, Chuck A., Greg Kenzo, Faith Howell, Eve England, Jason M. Oken, Melissa Longo, for myself, Sirach, Melissa, Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. We want to thank you all very much for partying with us. It's time to go to bed, though. We'll see you next time. And until then, always remember the seventh rule.